everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It is Friday, so it must be a buy day. And today, Amanda, we have a very special buy day about one of my all-time favorite authors, Edgar Allan Poe.
Ooh.
And I'm really excited because we got a book in the short room this week which really tells you all you need to know about Poe. It combines his love of storytelling with his love of poetry, with his desire to be a critic and an editor, and it brings it all together in this wonderful antebellum American magazine called Graham's Magazine, which Poe was the editor of for a short period of time in the 1840s.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so here it is in all of its glory. It's Graham's Magazine for 1842, and like other magazines at the time, it was a monthly, and then the parts would be collected together at the end of the year, and people would have them bound. Let's talk a little bit about the magazine itself first, and we'll go here to the title page, because right away you can see that Graham's Magazine was not just for women or just for men, it was for both. And part of the reason they say that is because its chief competitor at the time was a magazine called Godey's Ladies Book, and we have a bunch of those here. They were filled with fashion plates and designs, and but they were marketed mostly for women. And Graham wanted even a wider readership, so he wanted it marketed to everybody. And that's why he says Ladies and Gentlemen's Magazine, and it's with the finest mezzotintos and steel engravings. And let me point out here that we have a beautiful mezzotint by a Philadelphia engraver by the name of John Sartain, who's probably the most famous American mezzotint artist of the period. He worked in Philadelphia. He was a friend of Poe's for all the rest of Poe's life. Poe and Sartain overlap at Graham's Magazine, but Poe eventually quits his job as editor of the magazine. Sartain stays for a while, starts his own magazine, and there's a wonderful encounter right at the end of Poe's life, Amanda. In the weeks leading up to his mysterious death in the streets of Baltimore, he apparently went to Sartain's house because Sartain writes this account of Poe just knocking on his door in the middle of the night. Sartain comes down, sees it's Poe, doesn't know what's going on, and Poe says, "Can I have a razor? I need a razor." He's like, "Why do you need a razor?" "I need a razor. I've got to shave my mustache. There are people trying to kill me," said Poe. So he took Sartain's razor, he shaved off his mustache, and he eventually left. He went down to Richmond and then was found dead in Baltimore. And we don't really know how Poe met his final end, but that was the final encounter between Poe and this wonderful mezzotint engraver.
Interesting.
Now, the magazine was published by a gentleman by the name of George Graham, and he is famous because he decided he would pay his writers more money than they had ever been paid to write for magazines before. Not only did he hire Poe to be editor, and he gave Poe a salary, but he agreed to pay $5 a page, Amanda, for any contributions to the magazine, which was an extraordinary amount of money for back then. And I think Poe was not making that much more than that a month, but it was $5 a page, so he could get all the great writers of the day, you know, whether it's, we have a James Fenimore Cooper article back out of retirement to write for Graham's because he could make a fortune writing these naval biographies and other types of things that Cooper was doing at the time. And he also paid for the engravings, and he was the first American magazine editor to also copyright the works. And this was important too because he couldn't, there was no such thing as an international copyright. We know that from Dickens and others complaining. So there was nothing stopping somebody from taking Poe's stories and publishing them in England, but there was something stopping them from doing that in the United States. So he paid his editors and his writers and his illustrators extremely well. And it worked very well because Graham and Poe together increased the circulation of this magazine in 1842 to 40,000 people, which at that point was pretty unheard of. 40,000 of each of these monthly installments. Now, probably 1/10 of that, 1/20 of that was actually ended up bound in these yearly volumes.
Sure.
So let's talk about Poe's contributions. Look at this book. Every place that I put a marking is original writing by Edgar Allan Poe, which is really, really cool. And it's all the different genres in which Poe wrote. But let's start with his most famous genre, which is the storytelling genre. And there are two great Poe stories in here that are considered first editions. One is The Oval Portrait, which I like. It's a famous story. He cites the works of Thomas Sully and others. But the more famous one is definitely this one here, The Mask of the Red Death, a fantasy. And as you can see, there he is, writing it under his own name. Now, since he was not being paid by the page, page, Amanda, he was getting his salary. It's not that long, The Mask of Red Death. It's only 2.5 pages. But it's powerful. Do you know the story of The Mask?
Yeah, we read it in school because it's short.
Okay, well, what did they tell you the Red Death was in school? Do you know?
Some kind of illness.
Well, it is a tiny kind of illness, but I think it's pretty clearly consumption or tuberculosis. And the reason for that is, at the time he's writing this, Poe's much younger wife, and also his cousin, but we won't go there, is showing the first signs of consumption. In fact, she's coughing up blood, Amanda.
Right.
And this is what the story is about. It's about a plague. There's the lead character, Prospero. He tries to retreat behind the walls of this abbey and castle, and they have a masquerade ball to celebrate, and they're just going to wait this thing out. But no, a mysterious costume stranger comes in. It turns out to basically be death, and everyone dies.
Right.
And, that's very Poe. Everyone dies. But I think it's about the inescapability of death. It's about consumption. Consumption also took Poe's mother, eventually took Poe's wife, took lots of people that Poe cared about. Let's just give you a little flavor. We're just going to read the final paragraph because it's that good, or at least the final little bit. And now we acknowledge the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revel, and died each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gay, and the flames of the tripods expired. And darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. And that's a famous line, which is quoted in everything from Stephen King to, you name it. The issue before of Graham's Magazine, Poe had just invented the murder mystery, and now he's doing this sort of phantasmagoric, wonderful Gothic fantasy.
Right.
There are also poems by Edgar Allan Poe that are published in this volume. And I wanted to show you an example of some of Poe's poetry to One Departed. Also a similar theme. You're getting a similar theme from Poe, but he's writing them under his name. Poe really wanted to be a poet, Amanda. That was what he was most interested in life. But he wrote the stories because they paid the bills and they made him famous.
Sure.
I will also say that he really got paid to do the book reviews. And every single issue here has original book reviews by Poe. And that's pretty interesting. And let me just say, if you were an author at the time, you did not want to get reviewed by Poe.
Oh, no.
If you were Nathaniel Hawthorne, well, guess what? Twice Told Tales? They've been told at least 3 times, and they weren't tales. They're essays. Dickens, and he loved Dickens, but Barnaby Rudge, he's done this thing well, to be sure. He would do anything well in comparison with the herd of his contemporaries, but he's not done it so thoroughly well as his high and just reputation would demand. Well, that's Dickens. Interesting story about Barnaby Rudge. Barnaby Rudge has a talking raven in it. And that's because Dickens had a pet raven named Grip. And do you know what Dickens did after the raven died? Well, we love taxidermy on this note. He had Grip stuffed. And you can see Grip today in the Free Library of Philadelphia.
Really?
That's right. It may be worth a field trip.
But
nonetheless, The Talking Raven and Barnaby Rudge, which we know Poe read. Why? Because the book review is here. Well, that inspired, of course, his famous poem, The Raven, which, in all irony of ironies, he ends up quitting his editors. Too much work, too much pressure. But he offers it to Graham to publish in Graham's Magazine the following year. And you know what Graham says about The Raven? It's not very good. He doesn't really want it. So they lose out on publishing The Raven.
Well.
But anyhow, there's one more really interesting thing in here, man. I'm just going to show you. He liked, these are the fashion plates. There's all sorts of great stuff in here. But he liked to do something called handwriting analysis. This is a part of Poe that I don't think our viewers know anything about. He did this several times. He would analyze people's signatures for information about their character. And I don't know, it's almost like a conjuring of some sort, but it's basically an excuse for him to criticize people. And what do you think he had to say about that signature of Ralph Waldo Emerson? Oh, he didn't like it.
Loose morals or something?
his manuscript is bad, sprawling, illegible, irregular, although sufficiently bold. The latter trait may be, and no doubt is, only a portion of his general affectation. Boy, well.
Do we know what Poe's signature looked like?
Yes, we do. I don't have a copy of it, but it was saying, I don't know how we would have analyzed it. One last Poe book before we go, only because, Amanda, it's just an interesting oddity. This is a gift book. Remember how we last spoke about Poe writing articles for gift books? He wrote The Pit and the Pendulum in a Christmas annual, which is just strange. But this is a special gift book because of who edited it. It was edited by Elizabeth Doughton, or Lizzie Doughton. And it's the only gift book I know to have been edited by a medium. And a medium who believed that she, in a trance state, could channel Poe. And Lizzie Doughton wrote poem after poem after poem, which she claimed were dictated to her by Edgar Allan Poe, including The Streets of Baltimore. Let's see what you think. Here's the end. Now no longer sadly yearning, love for love finds sweet returning, and there comes no ghostly raven tapping at my chamber door. Calmly in the golden glory I can sit and read life's story, for my soul from out that shadow hath been lifted evermore, from that deep and dismal shadow in the streets of Baltimore.
I don't know about that.
Well, that's okay.
It's a little on the nose.
All right, we're going to end with a funny book. And in honor of Birds and the Raven and Grip, who we have to go see at the Free Library, Amanda, I just thought we'd go with To Kill a Mockingbird, a book that we sell at the counter at the bookstore. Now, a little known fact about Midtown Scholar lore, we have tried for many years to come up with names of beverages after famous literary works. To Kill a Mockingbird has taken that to a whole new level. I'm just going to share with you a few of my favorites in honor of Milton. Paradise Sauced. That's not bad. But I do like A Rum of One's Own for
That's
Virginia
good.
Woolf. That's very good. And then if you're feeling particularly inclined, The Bloody Carrie. And by the way, Stephen King, congratulations to him. 50th anniversary of Carrie this week. And you can read about that in the New York Times book review section. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you'll watch next Friday and every Friday at noon for more adventures in the world of books.